so are we running out?
Yes.
Okay, you're both on.
I only do this and I have to do it.
I know.
I mean, like you. No, I can't imagine being this tiny.
Oh, I don't know, Christie had like 7 people fighting her to do it.
It's out of control.
I've only run.
Testing 1, 2, 3.
You and I heard you.
Since that's.
Right.
I mean.
Mine's better.
Yeah, I think you could take this picture.
Tell you what.
No.
I like.
That's good.
Look, there it is.
Chance, testing 1, 2, 3.
Want to drag it out though.
No, I understand.
Testing 1, 2, 3.
What was it?
Well, it was, I hear I want you guys the first time we ever saw.
Well, I just, I
Put
want
them set down.
to make sure the chest is full of dollars.
No.
Okay, so I started looking at them like, you've already proved out. All right.
See, fill that.
Because that's.
Yes.
Between this, the election advisories, that is, that's the advisories, we have the two results of the already trying to go.
Second.
Yes, I was just telling you that. If you. No, it is. I'm sure they.
Right, exactly. Yeah, no, yeah. It doesn't matter, whatever I go away.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't have.
Sure, on both sides.
Yeah, exactly.
The legislature hasn't met to require masks. And figured out Well, I've never heard that. Masks.
Find out.
Well, they're gonna need one.
I'm exempt.
Makes everyone.
I'm totally good.
So I take it from your monthly man. You can wear that?
We're exempt.
Is that,
Yeah, we're exempt.
you have a doctor's note with your,
That's a HIPAA question.
when you leave this meeting, order meeting, ready to split you off.
We'd like Ben Stool to come back in this room and we want to talk to Ben Stool.
In here?
Yeah, I'm over here.
No, we're just here to provide legal advice to the county election committee.
Okay.
The legislature hasn't met to require Texans to wear masks. And Greg Abbott rescinded his order. And therefore, we don't believe the county's order is a lawful order. And by the way, we are unaware, we'd actually like to see the order. We don't want a representation that it.
We'll get you all of, everything you asked for, you can get from the elections department, but if you don't want to wear a mask, we're gonna be.
Bench stool? What's your position on this? The Article 28 of the Texas Bill of Rights. You cannot suspend state law without the meeting of the legislature. There's no law that requires us to wear a mask. And so we're being ejected from a public meeting basically on a tyrannical order. There's no legal basis for this order. And by the way, no one's produced the order.
Did you want to say anything before?
No, I'm not here to answer questions from the crowd. Yeah, we're just here to provide legal advice to the county election commission concerning the legal authority of the county election commission to do what it is that they have fulfill their statutory duties.
So, and we respect your opinion, but you give the county order. They'll tell by the field. How do you that in the Supreme Court? So I'm gonna have to ask you to wear a mask or leave. Think this is better. Social justice.
Okay, we're not agreeing to leave. You can get a sheriff deputy.
They'll be here to escort you out momentarily.
Yeah. That sounds like very good. Yeah.
You please follow this security guard.
Money.
That's not a sheriff deputy.
It's not a sheriff's
That's a
deputy.
security guard.
That's a
Someone's
security.
getting what?
Yeah, that's very glad that we had. Whatever. All. I'll do that.
Excuse me, is everything a microphone so we can hear?
Yeah, we don't. We're gonna do these from down on, downtown and go. Do we have a microphone anywhere in this building?
Yes, we do.
Five of those, or six of those?
We do not, Judge. We have two.
I just can't.
One over here. I don't want to do the whole.
Just as an FYI though, we are getting a new camera sound system put in just for these meetings. It's haven't been installed yet. It's gonna be actually, I think, next week.
Yeah, I just couldn't hear Judge Jenkins.
Can hear you, but cannot understand with the mask on. It's too muffled.
Well, I apologize. Talking a lot with the mask on.
We're getting a microphone currently. They're bringing it in right now. The judge's voice is a little bit hoarse currently because he's been using his mask a lot this week.
Helped if you didn't wear a mask while you talked, but I understand.
I don't know. I think maybe virtually. Like virtually.
You're right.
Correct.
And that's how we're doing it, associated with it. Let's call it to order and since the March 22, primary election. Posted all members get present. All function is 10:15 and we have to start the meeting. First thing on that for these meetings, I don't get started on motion over. Motion over, saying aye. First thing on the agenda is the discussion of the March 22 joint primary election, Mr. Scarpello, you want to take us through that discussion?
Yes, certainly. Good morning, everyone. So, yes, prior to talking about the next election, I just wanted to talk very briefly, just to give you a heads up on the last election, because the two are tied. And so we conducted an election. So we conducted an election for the November constitutional election, and was a pretty successful election. No ballot definition issues or counting issues, no communications issues, no mail ballot issues, no early voting issues, no personnel issues. We improved on our facility issues, a decreased number of issues there, a decreased number of logistics issues, electric hardware issues, no significant opening issues for our 443 locations, and no help desk issues. We did have some new signage for that election. We had a successful implementation of our new e-poll book monitoring process. We had a successful design and implementation of our new vote center procedures. And we had successful implementation of our new training program. And we continue to use our analytics program to conduct the election as efficiently and as effectively as possible. This is also related to the next election as far as the personnel update. I wanted to talk about our new employees. We have a new communications manager, Nick Solorzano. Nick, you here somewhere?
No.
Should be coming in and out of the room. He just started here like 3 weeks ago. New voting site supervisor, Jordan Beatty, started in December 2021. New GIS technician, Ronald Drake, started in October 21. And a new voting sites clerk, Shannon Zinlock, started in January 2022. And we have a new district relations manager, John Bart, starts February 14th, next week, or a couple of weeks is now. And IT positions, we are still having a lot of difficulty hiring positions. I think we had one position we hired 4 times and had people back out or not qualifying. We have 51 budgeted positions, 10 vacancies. In our IT area, we have 5 positions with 3 vacancies. Temporary employees, which we use quite a bit for elections, we are struggling to find. The temp agency is not supplying us with temps, so we're doing the best we can. And prior to this next election, that will have a huge effect on the 22 election is that there's, we all know that every 10 years there's census takes place. After the census, as part of the census, they measure language. Who speaks alternate languages? And once a county reaches a 5% threshold for a particular language, the county is required to provide all election materials in that language. So after the 2020 census, the Department of Justice determined that Vietnamese will now be required in Dallas County. So all of our ballots and materials need to be translated. Have required recruiting of bilingual poll workers for all of our locations that we speak Vietnamese, and which is going to be very difficult. So we moved very quickly to try to do that, but because this just happened about a month ago, and so we know that we are successfully translating all of our materials. We've got some temp workers helping us with that. For our poll workers, though, we know that's going to be very difficult. So what we've done is we're in the process of getting a translation application, not a live person on a. So if you go into a polling place or a vote center and you speak Vietnamese and you do not speak English, we'll have a cell phone. Every one of our judges will have a cell phone. They'll be able to pull up a live person to translate for them. So it's not a recording or a Google Translate, it's a live person. So we're in the middle of trying to acquire that, be compliant with federal law. And we've requested a new full-time bilingual coordinator, just like we have a full-time bilingual coordinator for Spanish. We're looking for a full-time bilingual coordinator for B. Prior to this election, we had hoped to have a new training warehouse facility to help us run this coming election. The scheduled completion date was January 4th, but because of supply chain issues, et cetera, that's been delayed, and the new opening date is March 2022. So we will not be involved. Primary operations will be out of this facility. Citizen Election Advisory Committee met in December 2021. It's formed some new subcommittees to help us run these elections, including the upcoming one. They've got a training subcommittee, a vision and values subcommittee, and a voter registration subcommittee. So we're really trying to use SEAC more substantively than we have in the past. SEAC spent a lot of its time just kind of talking about complaints, and we're trying to really get them to give us some good input on how to improve our elections.
Mr. Scarpello, CEF stands for the Citizens Elections Advisory Committee.
That's correct.
And it's not required by law that the county or size have one, but Dallas County Commissioners many years ago established this committee.
That's correct.
And it is kind of on the and it's been established in the last year.
That's correct. In fact, the Commissioners Court went as far as now enacting new bylaws for the committees to give us more guidance to tell us how to use that committee.
And they weren't meeting on regular. Now they're meeting regularly.
Orderly. So talking about more directly about the joint primary election. So this will be our first joint primary election. It has a lot of benefits for voters. Everyone will go to the same, will be using the same vote centers that we use, for instance, for the May election and the November election. So we will have our full complement of all the vote centers. In past primaries, it was a little confusing for voters because sometimes a voter had to go to, a Democratic voter went to one location and a Republican voter went to another location. Or you went to the same location and they were in different sides of the room, et cetera. So this election will look much more like the election, for instance, last November or next November. Same procedures, the anonymity of a ballot choice. So you'll basically go, I think I'm going to talk a little bit more about that. And so there's benefits for the voters, and then there's benefits for the parties. Poll worker pay is one of them. Commissioners Court generously voted in the contract when we negotiated the contract to allow to supplement poll worker pay. Poll workers, the parties are reimbursed for poll worker pay at $12 an hour. We know that it's very difficult to get poll workers at any rate, let alone only $12 an hour. So the county is paying the difference between that $12 an hour and what a poll worker would normally make, which is $16 an hour for a clerk or $18 an hour for a judge. And then, of course, vote center management. In other words, we're doing the work for them. We're helping the parties run this for them so they don't have to manage vote centers independent. And I just want to say thanks to the party leadership. This was a courageous move for the benefit of voters. I know that not everyone was, change is always difficult, and not everyone was immediately, thrilled with the idea of a joint election, but it really is the best thing to do for voters. So I'm very grateful for the leadership of the party. I think we're really doing the right thing. So, like I mentioned earlier, the same number of voting centers, 47 early voting centers, 400, as many as 468 elected vote centers. We're trying to get that nailed down by the 31st. So we're getting close to the number of vote centers that we'll have. Of course, it'll be about 2,000 poll workers. And on the ballot, one thing that's different on this election, because of delay in redistricting, re-precincting, et cetera, state has decided that there will be no party precinct shares on this ballot. So the ballot would look somewhat different. That would be the major difference between this election and previous elections. Those precinct shares will be on a runoff election late May. Sample ballot is available now. And I should say this about sample ballot. We're redesigning the look and feel of that. The sample ballot right now is really a list of, I call it a list of candidates. And we're working with our vendor to actually make a sample ballot that looks more like a ballot, that what you will actually see in the polling place or on your screen. So that's actually going to come out next week. We're trying that for the first time. But right now, we do have a list of candidates available.
If I can, you mentioned on your personnel update slide that you have difficulty filling the temp position. But on your slide, you have election voting centers and 2,000 poll workers. So don't those two coincide? And how do you plan on rectifying getting those needed 2,000 poll workers?
Sure, great question. So we want to distinguish between poll workers who work at the polling place and temp workers who supplement our crew here, our full-time staff here. So we have 51 budgeted full-time staff members. But as we expand, we're built to expand with the temporary workers to help us do things like process ballots, prepare our equipment, et cetera. So typically we might have 50, 100 temp workers coming in.
But you're having a difficulty getting, so that still applies whether it's those temp workers that are here on site or the poll workers at each of those.
We're in pretty good shape on poll workers. We're having difficulty with ones that work at this location. The poll workers that work out of the field, the parties are working with us to recruit those folks. We're doing pretty good there.
Temporary worker would work more full-time hours, just that election.
That's correct. Yeah,
So it's easier to get somebody who works a shorter period of time.
that's correct.
We have the same problem in the tax office getting paid. Difficulty.
Obviously, the poll workers got to be closer to the area where they live versus coming down to.
That's another factor again. So like I mentioned, it's a little bit more, so this is joint primaries like any other election, same locations. But when you walk in, what you see, it will be the same thing you saw in November. One check-in station, everybody goes to the same check-in station, the same voting machines, and the same vote tabulator. So there's no distinguishing between parties on any of those. The only difference, and then there will be an equal number of Democratic and Republican clerks and judges. And the judges will be co-judges. The only difference between those two judges is the party judge for the Republicans handles Republican voters that have exceptions to the standard voting procedure. So, or in the Democratic judge handles Democrats who have exceptions to the standard voting procedure. Other than that, for normal voters or for a voter that doesn't have a problem, they're processed just like anyone else, and the judges don't even interact with them. The voter chooses their ballot by going to the e-poll book. We look up their name. Once we look up their name, we turn the screen around, and the voter simply chooses Democrat or Republican for which ballot they want. So we don't have to ask them, they don't have to say it out loud, they don't have to go into a separate line, they want to get a Democratic ballot, it's a very anonymous process. And then one other thing, we've got a new grading test for our poll worker timekeeping software that we put on those poll books that we're going to apply for this election. Training for this election, we had to make some modifications for SB1. We just filmed this morning, in fact, a new introduction video by our party chairs. Welcoming we got 2 movie stars here. Welcoming folks. We've got a new teamwork video. We partnered with the county's consultant, ABI. Really kind of talk about the importance of Democrats and Republicans working together at the polling place, because we want to lessen that drama if we can, because sometimes that can be, this is new, and so we want to get people really in the mood to work together.
Mr. Scarpello, before we did a joint primary election that's separate, and like you mentioned, many of the locations have vote, they were just on different sides of the room this side. You may vote this way or vote in that room. How many locations approximately did we have that just had a single party voting station?
I'm not aware of that. I don't.
Very few,
Very few.
very few.
So that's good then. And so none of those locations have been reduced. Now they'll still have the same ability to vote at that location, but now it'll be open to the other party. Thank you.
As far as training goes, because we're still in COVID, we're trying to minimize the number of people on site. So experienced poll workers who worked in the past will be available to get online training. But new workers who haven't touched machines as yet, et cetera, will be required to have in-person training here in this room. Communications plan, I mentioned that we've got a new communications manager. He's in the process of building a new communications plan. And generally speaking, it's going to have increased voter registration outreach, increased voter registration. We're looking at building a new website and more to come. So if they ever show up in today. So once he does, I will make sure he waits and says hello. And so Nick and his team are already super busy. Talking about baptism by fire. I mean, he's been incredibly busy with a lot of things so far. Election readiness, and as far as SB1 changes, SB1 was passed late in special session. There's Nick. Nick, say hi.
Hey, how y'all doing?
Was passed in a special session, and it's very complex. And there's typically when new laws are passed, the Secretary of State, the new laws by themselves tend to be vague. And so the Secretary of State follows those up with election guidance documents, interpreting the law and helping the 254 counties implement those laws. And so those guidance documents for implementing SB1 and other changes that were passed this year are very late, very late. In fact, I think we got 3 guidance documents, election advisories just last Friday night at like 8 o'clock at night. I think we're still getting new forms. Here it is, as late as just Tuesday this week. So that makes implementing these changes very difficult. I mean, we're at E-30, we're 31 days before the election right now. And so getting these new changes into our process, changing our processes, changing our training, et cetera, is extremely difficult. I can tell you there's a great deal of frustration around the state by election officials trying to implement these changes so late. Now, that's not to say that I'm not knocking the Secretary of State's office. They're doing a tremendous amount of work in a very short period of time. Burden on them is great. So some of the changes for us, for our Senate count area, one of the changes in SB1 says that we have to have a new video surveillance system and then live streaming of all ballot candidate areas. So we're installing that new video system now and the new live streaming. And so someone will be able to go on to our website and click on certain buttons. We're still figuring that out to look at the various rooms where ballots are handled once ballots start being handled mid-February.
I mean, just pick the audience being, do you expect more people to want to see citizen count, or because it's live stream, do you think?
I don't know. That's a great question. I mean, I'm a numbers guy, so we will be watching those analytics, with our Google Analytics, et cetera, to see what our hits are and see how we might want to modify, et cetera. I really don't know at this point. So also in Central Count, we're rebuilding our whole Central Count station to make it more user-friendly or more poll worker poll watcher friendly, making it kind of like a clean room where there's no other activities in there other than handling ballots. And then in addition to that, we're adding new big TV screens like we see up here, so poll watchers can actually see the vote totals or the USB, the accounting for ballots as they come in, if you will. So they can watch that live. They tend to like to do that. And they tend to like to look over our folks' shoulders, and it makes close orders, especially in a period of COVID. So we're making it, kind of, I think it's going to end up being the premier central count station in the state. And I think it'll be the one that people will want to use as this is how a central count should be built. So we have the luxury of having this new facility here that we can do that. So we're pretty excited about that.
Square footage of that area, or
I don't know square footage, but I'd be glad to show you that after this meeting. And then within Central Count, we are continuing to migrate away from our vendor ESNs. I think I said before in past meetings that we are paying ESNs $1,650 a day for each person they had here, that we're doing a lot of work. And so instead of them doing the work, we're working with them to train our people to do the work, which makes much more sense anyway. We should be owning that work. And so our Central Count team has been doing a great job with this migration.
so if I can, just for point of clarification, you said continued migration away from ESNs, not the actual software, but the on-site support.
Yes, that's correct. The ESNS labor, not the ESNS work. The biggest change in SB1 that it has an effect on people, the public, is new mail ballot requirements. So SB1 says that there needs to be a new vote by mail application, and on that application, there has to be a driver's license number, place for a person to put either a driver's license number or a social security number. So that application looks like this, where they fill out their name, et cetera, and they have to put either their driver's license or social security number. And they have to use this new application, not an old application. So the new application wasn't published until sometime in December, but a lot of people had already applied before that or downloaded an old application where they had an old application stuck in the cache or their computer, et cetera. And so that first week, all around the state, what you saw was rejection rates of near 40% because people were using old applications in that very first round. And so since then, people are now, the word's getting out, don't use your old application, clear out your cache, use the new application. And when you do, make sure you fill out not just one, but two, but fill out both when in doubt, fill it out is kind of the catchphrase we're using, to fill out both the driver's license number and the social security number. And the reason for that is we have, on your voter registration, you have sometimes a voter registration, driver's license number or social security number. And when you send in your application, your numbers have to match. So if someone sends in an application with a social security number, but we have a driver's license number only, it won't. We'll have to reject it. Or vice versa, if someone has a driver's license number, but we have a file of social security number, we'll have to reject it. And so we're saying, fill out both. Put it out, fill it out, fill out everything, and make sure you sign it because it's up. The good news is that the rejection rate has gone from around 40% down to about 11%, but that's still high. So we're continuing to, in partnership with our other counties, with the Secretary of State, and with our own, we're looking to do more of a PR campaign to really push that people need to fill out this application properly for the new requirements of SB1. And that's really important for not only the application, but for the ballot itself, because this year there are new mail ballot envelopes. These mail ballot envelopes look different than they've looked in the past. I think the mail ballot envelopes on the way out, when they were sent to people, they were in a green envelope. This year they will be in a white envelope. And the return envelope that used to be a manila is now a white with like a purple stripe on it. And this is a new statewide design. And on this design, it's a very busy envelope, frankly. Lots and lots of verbiage. And this is all required by the not by the Secretary of State, but by the legislature. And it's frankly, in my opinion, very, very difficult for a voter to use. And I really think that we need to coach the legislature on proper design of envelopes, but sometimes less is more. And we have just so much information on these envelopes, it's very difficult for a voter to use. But in any case, on this envelope, a person has to sign and they have to fill out either their driver's license or their social security number. And the number has to match the number that they put on their application. And so it's kind of this chain between the information between your registration, between your application and your ballot. And so we really we're trying to push out that educational effort with the parties, with the Secretary of State, with our colleagues in other counties. And then here in Dallas County, we're going to try to have a media effort, if you will, to try to educate people about this new law.
So when they got their original voter registration card, they either gave you their driver's license or their social security, but now they ask for mail-in ballot and they give you both. Can we update their record?
Yes.
Is that allowable by law?
That's correct.
So we can update their record at that point and put both of them on. So for future, if, for example, when they actually return their ballot, we won't have the issue with not being able to.
I believe so, yeah.
And Mr. Scarpello, can you briefly explain the process that the elections department takes when a mail-in ballot comes in? What if they open it up and see that there's a discrepancy? What happens with that?
So great point, and I should have mentioned that before. So when we have, I think we have 700 of these right now. We send a rejection letter. And this rejection letter, if this is a prescribed form by the Secretary of State that says, hey, your application was missing some information, you need to correct it. And so you can either send in a brand new application, or you can go to the Secretary of State's website, verify your information. And we've been hesitant to send out those. We're actually sending those rejection letters today, even though we could have sent them up as long as a week ago. The reason we've held off is because the Secretary of State's website for large counties has not worked. That correction, way to correct those ballots for the voters in Dallas County and 9 of the largest 10 largest counties, that has not worked. And so they're working diligently with our vendor and with the Secretary of State's office to get that to work properly. And I think it's probably up to date. So that now we're going to be sending those rejection letters. People can send us in new applications or go to the Secretary of State to hear their application.
We're at 11% right now. Do you know the rejection rate of mail-in ballots typically, or, on the election?
I do not, but that's a great way to get that rate.
All right, I don't know why I don't have this for Dallas County, but I know for Harris County, it was like 2.3%, so.
Previously.
Yeah.
Previously, yeah.
So,
I think the good news is that our rejection rate has been trending lower than the other large counties. Slightly, I think they're running anywhere from 14 to 24%. And that's credit to our voter registration department, who has really worked hard to get a lot of driver's license numbers into our voter registration system. So feeling pretty good there.
one more question, because, because of the delay with the ballot tracking software, a delay, that makes sense in sending out the rejection notices. Is there anything else that is being done to reach out and educate voters on this change, this rejection?
We are putting today, in fact, we're putting a proposal from the Commissioner's Board for next Tuesday, potential campaign with different options of things that we can do to educate the public. So remains to be seen the extent of what we're going to do yet. But we've got our consultants working on it.
Just a point of clarification, so this SOS link system that a voter can go to, that would enable them to instantaneously correct their mail-in ballot? I mean, what is the difference between that and sending a new application?
Either way works, as long as you fill out the new application and you fill it out properly. And keep in mind that there are multiple reasons that rejection happens. Sometimes it's because of missing signature, sometimes it's because of a missing driver's license number, sometimes it's because the number that they put down doesn't match the number that we have on file, et cetera. So there's a variety of reasons. At some point today, I'm going to find that out, because they said the fix was, I've been in contact with our vendor, a couple times a day, and they've been working very hard, and I got to tell you, the vendors, be fair to the vendors, is they have very, very late notice, very late notice. I mean, they have like 2 weeks to get this thing ready, for a highly complex, data transfer. So, this is just another one of these late, deliveries of things be prepared for this election. So I don't know that it's anybody's fault, but it is the circumstance that we're in, and people are working very hard to get it fixed. So at this point, as of yesterday, it was supposed to be fixed today, supposed to be up and running today.
So is it the large counties because the large counties?
It's because the large, there's a state voter registration system called TEAM, and that's used by most of the counties in the state. But that system is not sophisticated enough to handle the large volumes of voters. So most of the larger counties, I think there's at least 36 that use a different vendor than a TEAM. They use what we use, BMAX, it's called, our voter registration system. BMAX talks to TEAM, so there's some integration there. And so for those, so the Secretary of State got TEAM to work, but it did not get BMAX to talk to TEAM for these tiers. Vendors getting that fixed.
So insurance sounds like a bandwidth issue and an integration.
Yes,
And this all stems from the Texas legislature making laws that are too short in time period.
that's my belief, yes.
So if it's a bandwidth issue, wouldn't it be better instead of going to Pennsylvania's website, you go to, and this is Dallas County election website and update your information? And at some point that information is, syncs with the SOS database.
We're absolutely looking at all, because this problem isn't going away. This isn't just for this election. This will be for next November's election too. So we're looking at a lot. 2021 redistricting update. So I think I mentioned that the census results were delayed. Typically, if they come out April, I think they weren't released till August this year. And so once those, because those were delayed, the state's redistricting efforts and the county's redistricting efforts were obviously delayed because you can't redistrict unless you have the data. And then after all the state redistricted their 4 district lines, the county, then they hand those district lines to us that we have. So do that. Precinct line done, and I think having those down. Or then after redrawing those precinct lines, then the part comes, and that's getting the data into our local voter registration system. And then for 1.4 million voters, and then also getting that same information into the state's team system. So that was all done between that December 28th and sometime in January. And then that same, once that information's in, then voter registration certificates are printed and sent to voters. And the voter registration certificates typically go out in December, but like everything else, they were pushed back at these times. So they were going to go out in the first half of January, but because of supply chain issues, paper, printing, prep time, et cetera, those got pushed back a week or so. And I believe everything has been sent out this week, all voter registration certificates. The one thing to note on those voter registration certificates, typically it has all of your voting districts, you know, what Senate district I'm in, et cetera, et cetera. And it usually has city district on it. And it might say City of Dallas District 2 or City of, Dallas 4. And the difference this year is that there will be no single member districts for cities. And so it'll say Dallas 0 or Irving 0. There won't be a single member district. And the reason for that is that while, even though we have 4 state districts and the 2 county districts, we still don't have the city district, redistricting. So we got, I think, they have submitted in the month of January. But don't have some time to put their districts on certificates. So these certificates for the next 2 years will have less information than they've had in the past.
Can I ask you a question? Sure. And this is obviously the timeline and everything, but I get this question a lot as far as we have the new precincts and they're electronically on a map where we can go and look at them. Folks are wanting individual precinct maps, like we had electronically before. I know that. Do you have any idea of the maps right now?
Yeah, our intent on maps is, with our new GIS team, we want to put everything out as much as possible for free on the internet and make interactive applications rather than static PDF type maps.
Yeah.
Our new team is putting out a lot of more interactive maps so people can do their lookups on the maps. Something that feels a little bit more like Google. So, but having said that, some of that is delayed because our team, our 2-person GIS team, which is probably more than most counties around the state, they're still processing now these city maps. So they got these 10 or 11 city maps now that they've got to do that precincting and that's entirely complex. And a lot of these maps, frankly, are some of them are great because they're good GIS, our view maps with shape files. Some of them are, PDF paper maps. So there's a lot of interpretation, a lot of integration. A lot of sometimes the city's lines don't agree. And so there's just a lot of line work that has to be done for those maps. Before those, we have to basically do the same process we did in December and January when we did it for the election precinct. We have to redo it again now that we have our city districts in, and we're up against the time crunch to get that done for the May election. Because the thing I should mention, I did put in the presentation. Not only are we preparing for the March 1st primary election, we're also preparing for a county-wide May election, joint election. We're preparing for a second county-wide May election, 2.5 weeks later. I should back up. So the May 7th election is a constitutional election. There are 2 constitutional amendments. For city. And then the second election in May. The runoff primary. And then in June, there's a runoff for the first May election. So we're preparing for multiple elections at the same time, which is very difficult. So GIS folks are preparing now with those city districts. They're preparing for the May 7th election.
So basically, you're saying that some of the precinct lines will change based on.
The election precinct lines that we gathered done in December will not change. It's the sub-precincts, pieces of those that make up city districts will change. Any other questions? Okay. So Secretary of State forensic audit. So the forensic audit, funny people ask me what the term means, I'm not quite sure what forensic audit means, but it's just one of many things that we're working on where we have this kind of avalanche of records requests. So we have the forensic audit that we gave the first round in December, which was fairly small. But we're also preparing for a very large volume of records that have been kind of listed but haven't been officially asked for. We're starting to prepare for that. We're also involved in 4 lawsuits. Every one of those, that discovery process for those 4 lawsuits is immense, as big or probably bigger than the audit. And then we have this avalanche of Public Information Act requests from, a lot of copycat requests. All these different activist groups, I want this, I want this, I want this, I want this. So we're really, really struggling. And I can tell you, and we hired Robert Hearn, the room somewhere. Thanks, Robert. He's been very helpful to help us. Robert was the elections administrator, the past administration, and Robert knows what took place in the 2020 election. He's also a law school graduate, and he knows a lot about discovery, et cetera. And so he's been very helpful, and I think very thankful he's here. But nonetheless, he's not the only one. It's very stacked, and I'm really worried that it's going to affect our ability to conduct these elections. So, because the federal court says you need to give something, we can't say, well, we're busy. We've got to produce those records. So, it's a busy time. That's all the presentation that I have at this point, but I wanted to keep it fairly brief today.
If I can, those PIE requests and information, I see that being anything more than an expanded request for data that you already maintain. So I think the approach that you should have is that you have someone focused data gathering and maintain specific data, because they're going to ask for the same information, except with each year that report will change, that information will change. It may be a larger number, maybe a lower. So I would just say, going forward, since you know that these are the types of requests you're going to get, always just kind of like have those sets of data so that they're already just updated. That way you're not required to waste a lot of time doing the recreating the field, if you will. I get the same thing. I mean, tons of data as a request as it relates to criminal court records. So that's my approach. Maintain the data based on the request, and then just update them on a regular basis.
I couldn't agree more. And so I think I've talked in the past about our data infrastructure and our storage infrastructure. And that's definitely on our list of things to do to try to properly file things so that they're more accessible and digitize everything. Because right now, some of these requests, we have to dig into boxes and boxes and boxes of records, because some of these requests, some of these lawsuits, they're asking for records all the way back in 2016. So for every election since, so all the elections in 16, all the elections in 17, all the elections in 18, 19, 20. So it's unbelievable. This isn't just the 2020 election. This is very deep.
What's retention?
Election records are supposed to be retained for 22 months. So what we have, you know that we have records in warehouses. We did last year, we could purge a lot of records. Should have been had been purged. So we're trying to get them. But in federal lawsuits, they're free. And they say don't delete anything else.
I believe that covered all 5 discussion items. Thank you, Mr. Scarpello.
That's it.
So we'll go into executive session, to discuss personnel matters under chapter 551, the government code. Any action as a result of executive session, open session.
Maybe I missed it, and you're open to, just real, ask if there's any public comments.
Oh, okay. Anybody have any public comments? If so, I don't think we have anyone here to read the rules of the forum to our public speakers, do we? I'll just try to behave yourselves. Public comments. If anybody has a public comment, you have 3 minutes to speak. Just state your name and give her a microphone. She won't be able to hear.
I think I can speak loud enough.
Okay, whichever you prefer.
Judge Jenkins, I appreciate you being here in person because I've watched some of the commissioners' courts online. What's the problem when people are not all in the same room, whether on one side or the other, but it's very difficult.
And would you set your name
I'm
and address
sorry.
for the record?
Yeah.
Sorry.
Bonnie Wells, Richardson, Texas. It's very difficult to understand people with the mask anyway. And if I'm sure y'all can't hear me when I do this. So, and I understand that if you've been wearing a mask a long time, that you're breathing in all the stuff that's supposed to be breathing out. But I just would appreciate if you would speak up louder and clearer. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other public comment? Okay. Closed session. Did you ever check about the law of the closed session? Any action? Over this. So what about
You might be here.
I think that we could
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
One session. This committee stands adjourned. Thank you, everyone. Peace out. Yeah, the truth does. It was very close to this. Did you get out? Privilege.
Oh, yeah.
All right.
Okay, so we did a problem.
That's something.
So the teleprompter helps. Teleprompter was great. Yes. You haven't seen it yet.